They say the worst monsters don't chase you. They wait for you to come back. Clara Whitmore had heard that once, somewhere between a late shift and an empty apartment, and she didn't believe it until the night she found herself standing in the middle of a forgotten graveyard at 2:17 a.m., rain sliding down her face like cold fingers, her breath visible in the air even though it wasn't winter, and the silence felt wrong, too thick, like the world was holding its breath with her. And then she saw him, standing between the crooked headstones as if he had always been there. Tall, still, impossibly pale, his dark hair brushing the collar of a long coat that didn't move with the wind, his eyes fixed on her in a way that made her pulse stutter, not from fear, not exactly, but from something deeper, something she couldn't name, and every instinct told her to turn around, to walk the other way, to forget this place and never come back. But she didn't. She stayed, because for the first time in a long time, something was looking at her like she existed, not like she was invisible, not like she was just another tired woman trying to survive another day. And when the sound came from behind her, a low, shifting presence in the dark that made her spine lock and her feet freeze, it wasn't him she looked at. It was the shadows, and whatever was there stopped the moment he took a single step forward, just one, slow, deliberate movement that changed everything, and the air dropped 10 degrees. And the darkness itself seemed to pull back, like it recognized him, like it knew better. And Clara realized something then, something she should have understood right away, that whatever he was, whatever stood in front of her in that graveyard at 2:17 a.m., he wasn't the thing she should be running from. And that was the moment it became dangerous, because instead of leaving, instead of saving herself, she stepped closer, just an inch, just enough to see the faint red glow deep in his eyes, and whispered, "What are you?" The question hung between them longer than it should have, swallowed by the cold air that seemed to belong to him, not the night. And for a moment Clara thought he would disappear the way everything else had, fade into the fog and leave her alone with her own heartbeat. But he did not move, did not blink, just watched her with that steady, unnatural stillness. And when he finally spoke, his voice was low, smooth, carrying a weight that did not belong to any ordinary man. "You should not be here," he said, not answering her, not even acknowledging the question. And yet something in the way he said it made it feel like a warning meant only for her, not a threat. Never a threat. And that was what unsettled her the most, because men who meant harm never sounded like that. They did not give you a choice, they took it. But he was different, standing there like he had all the time in the world, like time itself bent around him, and Clara felt it then, the quiet pull, the impossible curiosity that pushed past her fear. "You did not answer me," she said, her voice steadier than she expected, even as her fingers curled against the damp fabric of her jacket. And something flickered in his eyes, not anger, not annoyance, something sharper, something older, like a memory brushing against the surface. "It would not matter if I did," he replied, and this time there was a faint edge beneath the calm, not directed at her, but at himself, and he turned slightly, just enough for the faint light of the distant street lamp to catch his profile, too perfect, too still, like a statue carved from something colder than stone. "You would not understand," he added. And that should have been the end of it. That should have been the moment Clara stepped back, turned around, walked out of the graveyard and never returned. But instead she took another step closer, her boots sinking softly into the wet ground, closing the distance that should have remained, because she had spent years being told what she would not understand, what she should not ask, what she should stay away from. And none of it had ever brought her anything except silence, except emptiness. And she was tired of it. "Then explain it to me," she said quietly, and the air shifted again, colder, heavier, like something unseen had taken notice, and for the first time, he reacted, not with movement, but with the smallest pause, the kind that should not have meant anything but somehow did, because it felt like hesitation, like a fracture in something unbreakable. And when he looked at her again, the faint red in his eyes deepened, not brighter, not dangerous, just deeper, like a truth he had buried for too long. "You should leave," he said again, softer now, almost human. And Clara realized something in that moment that made her chest tighten in a way fear never had. He was not telling her to go because he wanted her gone. He was telling her because he believed it was the only way she would survive him. And instead of stepping back, She shook her head, just once, small but certain, and whispered, "I do not think you are the one I need to be afraid of." The silence after her words did not feel empty. It felt watched, like the graveyard itself had turned its attention toward her. And for the first time since she stepped closer, something changed in him, not in the way he stood, not in the way he looked at her, but in the space between them, the invisible line that had kept her safe until now, because he did not step back. He did not disappear. He remained. And that was when Clara understood that staying was no longer something she was doing alone. It was something he was allowing. And that realization should have frightened her. It should have sent her running toward the dim glow of the streetlights half a mile away, back to the world that made sense, back to the life that, even in its exhaustion, had rules she could understand. But instead she stayed where she was, the rain slowing to a soft mist that clung to her hair, her skin, the air around them growing colder with every second. And then she noticed it, something she had missed before, something so small it almost did not exist, his breath, or rather the absence of it. No fog in the air, no rise and fall of his chest, just stillness, complete and absolute, like he had been carved out of the night itself. And yet his eyes, those faintly glowing eyes, were locked on her with a focus that felt more alive than anyone she had known in years. "You are not afraid," he said, not as a question, but as a quiet observation, and Clara let out a slow breath she did not realize she had been holding, her fingers relaxing slightly at her sides. "I think I was," she admitted, her voice softer now, honest in a way she rarely allowed herself to be, "but not of you." And there it was again, that flicker, that subtle shift in his gaze. Like something inside him did not know what to do with that answer, like it did not fit into whatever rules he had lived by for far too long. And for a brief second, something almost human crossed his expression, something that made her chest tighten, not with fear, but with recognition, because she knew what it felt like to be seen as something less than what you were, something to be avoided, something to be left behind. And before she could stop herself, before logic could catch up to instinct, she took another step forward, close enough now to see the faint lines at the corner of his eyes, the way the red glow shifted when the light touched it, and she raised her hand, slowly, carefully, giving him every chance to stop her, every chance to disappear, every chance to remind her that this was a mistake. But he did none of those things. He did not move, did not speak, did not break the moment. And her fingers hovered just inches from his sleeve, from the cold that seemed to live beneath the fabric. And in that suspended second, Clara realized something that made her heart beat harder than any fear ever had. If he wanted her gone, she would already be gone. And if he wanted to hurt her, he already would have. And that left only one possibility, one that made no sense and yet felt undeniable. He was holding back, not because he had to, but because he chose to. And that choice, more than anything else, was what made her finally close the distance, her fingertips brushing lightly against his arm, expecting nothing, prepared for everything. And the moment she did, the air around them shifted again, not colder this time, but deeper, like something ancient had just been awakened. The contact should have broken something, should have triggered fear or rejection or anything that made sense, but instead it did the opposite. The moment Clara's fingers brushed against his arm, the cold did not push her away. It settled, like it recognized her presence and chose not to resist. And for the first time since she had stepped into that graveyard, he reacted, not with force, not with anger, but with a stillness that felt sharper than anything else, his gaze dropping to where her hand rested against his sleeve, as if that single point of contact held more weight than anything spoken between them. And Clara felt it, too. Not pain, not danger, something deeper, something that moved beneath the surface of the moment like a quiet current, pulling at something she could not name. An instinct told her to pull back, to break whatever invisible line she had just crossed, but she did not move, because neither did he, and that was the only answer she needed. "You are cold," she whispered, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Simple, obvious, and yet somehow more intimate than anything else she could have said. And his eyes lifted back to her slowly, that faint red glow deepening again, not brighter, not threatening, just more present, like something inside him had been stirred by her voice alone. "I am not like you," he said quietly. And this time there was no distance in his tone, no attempt to deflect or avoid, just a truth laid bare between them, and Clara nodded slightly, as if she had already known, as if the confirmation did not change anything that mattered, because it did not in the way she expected, not in the way it should have. I know, she replied, her voice steady despite the weight of what she was accepting. And for a brief second, something flickered across his expression again, something almost like disbelief, like he had expected her to step away, to recoil, to finally see him for what he was and choose survival over whatever this was becoming. But she did not, and the silence that followed was different now, no longer tense, no longer uncertain, but charged, like the air before a storm that had not decided whether it would break. And then it happened, subtle, almost imperceptible, but undeniable. The ground beneath them seemed to shift, not physically, but in presence, as if the graveyard itself had acknowledged the moment, the connection, and far beyond the edge of Clara's vision, something moved, not close enough to be seen, but close enough to be felt, a ripple through the darkness that did not belong to him. And his expression changed instantly, not into fear, not into anger, but into something colder, something protective, and in a single, fluid motion, he stepped closer, closing the distance completely, placing himself between her and whatever had just stirred in the night. And for the first time, his voice carried a quiet urgency, still controlled, still calm, but no longer distant. You need to leave, he said, softer than before, but far more serious, and Clara felt it then, not fear of him, but of whatever existed beyond him, whatever had just taken notice. And yet even as that realization settled in, she did not move away from him. She did not step back, because the closer he stood, the clearer one truth became. Whatever he was, whatever the world would call him, he was not the one she needed to be afraid of. And when she looked up at him, standing impossibly still in the shifting dark, she realized something that made her heart beat harder than before. He was afraid, not for himself, but for her. The shift in him was immediate, subtle to anyone else, but unmistakable to Clara. The way his shoulders stilled even further, the way the faint red in his eyes darkened into something more controlled, more guarded, and the space around them tightened as if the night itself had drawn a line that nothing should cross. And for a moment Clara forgot to breathe, not because she was afraid of him, but because she realized he was listening to something she could not hear, something moving beyond her senses, something that did not belong to the quiet stillness of the graveyard. And his presence changed again, not retreating, not pulling away, but anchoring itself between her and the unseen, as if that was where he had always intended to stand. And she felt it then, the difference between being near him and being protected by him, a realization that settled deep and refused to be ignored. You felt that, she said, softly, not a question but an acknowledgement. And he did not answer right away, his gaze fixed somewhere beyond her shoulder, calculating, measuring, as if deciding how much to reveal and how much to hide. And when he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that pressed into the silence around them. There are things in this world that do not wait for permission, he said, each word deliberate, controlled. And Clara understood what he meant without needing him to explain further, because she had felt it too, that ripple in the dark, that quiet shift that made the air heavier, like something had turned its attention toward them. And for the first time since she stepped closer to him, fear brushed against her thoughts, not sharp, not overwhelming, but present, undeniable. And yet even then, her feet did not move. She did not step back, because the closer he stood, the more certain she became of one thing. Whatever was out there, it was not standing between her and him. It was beyond him. And that meant he was still the line that nothing had crossed. Then why are you still here? She asked, her voice steady despite the question pressing deeper than she intended. If it is so dangerous. And this time his reaction was immediate, his gaze snapping back to hers with an intensity that made the world narrow to just that moment, just that connection. And for a fraction of a second, something broke through his control. Not anger, not fear, something far more complicated. Something that felt dangerously close to honesty. Because you are, he said quietly, and the words landed heavier than anything else he had spoken. Simple, direct, and impossible to ignore. And Clara felt her breath catch, not from fear, but from the weight of what he was admitting without fully saying it, that he had chosen to stay, not for the night, not for the place, but for her. And the realization should have changed everything, should have made her step back and reconsider the path she was standing on, but instead it did the opposite. It pulled her further in, made the distance between them feel irrelevant, made the danger feel secondary to something far more immediate, and before she could stop herself, before logic could rebuild the wall she had already stepped through, she said the one thing that should have ended it all, the one thing that should have forced him to push her away. "Then I am not leaving." And the silence that followed was not empty. It was charged, heavy with consequences neither of them had fully faced yet. And for the first time, he did not tell her to go. The words did not fade. They stayed between them, solid, irreversible. And for the first time since Clara had stepped into the graveyard, the silence felt different, not uncertain, not waiting, but shifting into something that could not be undone. And Lucien did not move, did not look away, but something in him tightened, something deeper than control, deeper than instinct, like a line she had just crossed without realizing how far it stretched. And when he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than before, but heavier, carrying something that felt almost like warning and something dangerously close to restraint. "You do not understand what you are choosing," he said, and this time there was no distance left in his tone, no attempt to push her away with cold detachment. Just truth, bare and unguarded, and Clara felt it settle over her, not as fear, but as weight, the kind that comes when something matters more than it should. And yet she did not step back, did not break eye contact, because for the first time in a long time, she was not reacting, she was deciding, and that made all the difference. "Then tell me," she said, her voice steady, quieter now but stronger in a way that surprised even her. "Tell me what happens if I stay." And the question lingered, stretching the moment thinner, sharper, until it almost broke, and Lucien's gaze shifted slightly, not away from her, but through her, as if he was seeing something beyond the present, something older, something that had taught him exactly why this moment should not exist. And when he answered, it was not immediate, not simple, each word chosen with care, as if saying them out loud made them more real than he was willing to accept. "Everything changes," he said finally, and the air seemed to still around them, even the distant sound of wind fading into something distant and irrelevant. "For you," he added, and there it was again, that line, that invisible boundary he was trying to draw, not for himself, but for her, and Clara felt it, understood it, and still chose not to step away from it, because everything in her life had already been changing, slowly, painfully, without purpose, without meaning, and this, whatever this was, felt different, felt deliberate, felt like stepping into something instead of being dragged through it. And before doubt could find its way back into her thoughts, she closed the distance fully, her voice dropping to a whisper that carried more certainty than anything she had said before. "Then maybe it is time it does." And that was the moment everything shifted, not loudly, not violently, but undeniably, because Lucien did not tell her to leave, did not step back, did not break the connection she had forced into existence. And somewhere beyond the edge of the graveyard, something moved again, closer this time, more aware, as if the choice she had just made had been heard, had been answered, and for the first time, Lucien's expression hardened, not at her, never at her, but at the world beyond her. And when he spoke again, his voice carried something new, something ancient, something that did not ask for permission. "Then you stay close to me," he said, not as a suggestion, not as a request, but as a rule that had just been written into the night itself. And Clara realized, too late to turn back, that she already was. Clara did not realize how close she had moved until she felt the absence of space between them, not touching, not quite, but close enough that the cold surrounding him no longer felt distant. It felt shared, like stepping into a different kind of air that belonged only to him. And for a moment, everything else faded. The graveyard, the mist, the distant world she had come from. All of it reduced to the quiet intensity of standing exactly where she had chosen to be, and Lucien did not move away, did not create distance the way he had before, but something in his posture shifted, subtle, controlled, like he was adjusting to her presence in a way that had not been necessary until now. And that was when Clara understood the truth of what he had said. Everything changes, because the moment she chose to stay, the rules had already begun to rewrite themselves around them. And then it came again, stronger this time. Not just a ripple, but a presence that pressed against the edges of her awareness, like a pressure in the air that made her chest tighten slightly. And even without seeing anything, she knew they were no longer alone. And Lucian reacted instantly, not with panic, not with urgency, but with precision, his focus sharpening, his attention shifting outward while still keeping her within reach, and Clara felt it. The way his awareness extended beyond what she could perceive, mapping something unseen, something approaching, and for the first time she stepped closer without thinking, not out of fear, but because she knew exactly where she needed to be. And her voice dropped, quieter than before. "What is it?" she asked. And he did not answer right away, not because he did not hear her, but because whatever he was sensing demanded more attention than words could provide. And when he finally spoke, his voice carried a calm that felt intentional, chosen, like he was controlling the situation even if she could not see how. "Something that should not have followed you here," he said, and Clara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air, not sharp, not overwhelming, but enough to remind her that this world, his world, was larger than she had allowed herself to believe. And yet even then, she did not step back, did not question her choice, because she could feel it as clearly as she felt her own heartbeat. Whatever was coming was not looking at her, it was looking at him. And that realization changed everything again, because it meant she had not been the one who crossed into danger. She had stepped into something that had already been dangerous long before she arrived, and Lucian's expression hardened slightly, not with fear, not with anger, but with something resolute, something that made it clear he had faced this before, many times, and when he turned his gaze back to her, it softened just enough to carry something unspoken, something protective. "Stay with me," he said again. But this time it was not a rule. It was a promise, and Clara nodded without hesitation, without doubt, because she had already made her decision. And somewhere in the darkness beyond the graves, the unseen presence drew closer, not rushing, not hiding, simply arriving, as if it had always known where to find him, and now, where to find her. The moment stretched thin, fragile, as if the night itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next, and Clara could feel it now, not just a distant presence, but something closer, something aware, pressing gently against the edges of her perception like a question that had not yet been asked. And Lucian remained perfectly still, his attention divided in a way she could not fully understand, one part anchored to her, the other reaching outward into the darkness, tracking something unseen with an ease that felt practiced, familiar, and that realization alone told her everything she needed to know. This was not new to him. This was part of his world, a world she had just stepped into without knowing the rules, and yet she did not feel lost, not while standing this close to him. Not while his presence created a space that nothing else had crossed. And then the air shifted again, not colder, not heavier, but quieter, like the world had just lowered its voice. And Clara felt her heartbeat slow, not from calm, but from focus, because something was about to happen, something that would change the fragile balance they were standing in. And Lucian moved for the first time without hesitation, not stepping away, but turning slightly, positioning himself so that she was no longer just beside him, but behind him, shielded in a way that was subtle but undeniable, and she felt it instantly. The difference in the air, the way his presence became something more than stillness, more than silence, something that held weight, authority, something that did not ask for space but claimed it. And when he spoke, his voice was no longer quiet, no longer restrained. It carried through the graveyard with a calm certainty that did not need to rise to be heard. "You should not be here," he said. But this time the words were not meant for her. They were directed into the darkness beyond the graves, into whatever had drawn close enough to listen. And the silence that followed was not empty. It responded, not with sound, but with a shift so subtle it almost did not exist, like something had acknowledged him, had recognized him. And Clara felt it in the way the pressure in the air eased just slightly, not gone, not retreating, but waiting. And her breath caught softly as she realized what she was witnessing. Not a confrontation, not a threat, but something older, something bound by rules she did not understand. And for the first time, The word formed clearly in her mind without doubt. King, not just a title whispered by shadows, but a presence that shaped the world around him, and Lucien did not look back at her, did not need to. Because the space he held for her did not weaken, did not shift, it remained, constant and deliberate. And in that moment Clara understood something that settled deep within her, something that made the fear she should have felt dissolve into something else entirely. Whatever was out there, whatever had followed the edge of this place, it was not testing her, it was testing him, and he was not moving, not yielding, not allowing it to come any closer. And when the silence finally broke, it did not come with sound, but with absence. The pressure easing, the unseen presence pulling back just enough to signal a choice had been made, not by her, but by whatever existed beyond her sight. And Lucien remained exactly where he was, unmoved, unshaken, until the night settled again, and only then did he shift slightly, just enough to glance back at her, his eyes still carrying that faint red glow. But now something else lived there too, something quieter, something that had not been there before, and for a moment neither of them spoke, because they both understood the same thing without needing to say it. Whatever had just happened, it was not the end, it was only the beginning. The night settled, but it did not return to what it had been, because something had changed in a way Clara could not undo, not in the air, not in the silence, but in herself, and she felt it clearly now, standing just behind him, close enough to feel the faint chill that seemed to follow his every movement, close enough to understand that the space he created was no longer just protection, it was connection, something she had stepped into without hesitation and now could not step out of even if she tried. And when Lucien turned slightly toward her, the faint glow in his eyes dimmed just enough to reveal something beneath it, something quieter, something almost human, and for a moment neither of them spoke, because words felt unnecessary, too small for what had just passed between them, and Clara realized that the fear she should have felt was gone, replaced by something far more dangerous, something that did not push her away but held her there, steady and certain. And when she finally spoke, her voice was soft but unwavering. "It listened to you," she said, and Lucien did not deny it, did not confirm it. But the way his gaze held hers told her everything she needed to know, and she took a slow breath, letting the reality settle into place, not questioning it, not fighting it, just accepting it for what it was, because for the first time in a long time, something in her life made sense in a way she could not explain, and she stepped closer again, closing the last inch of distance that had remained between them, not out of impulse, but out of choice. And when she looked up at him, there was no hesitation left, no doubt, only a quiet certainty that felt stronger than anything fear could have created. "You said everything would change," she whispered, her voice steady despite the weight of her own words. "But you did not say it would feel like this." And something in his expression shifted again, something deeper this time, something that had been buried beneath years, decades, something that had not been meant to surface again. And for the first time, he did not look away, did not retreat behind distance or silence. He simply looked at her, as if he was seeing something he had not allowed himself to see for a very long time. And when he spoke, his voice carried a quiet truth that settled between them like something inevitable. "It was never meant to," he said, and Clara felt her breath catch, not from fear, not from uncertainty, but from the realization that whatever this was, it had not been part of his world until now, and yet it existed, undeniable, irreversible, and somewhere beyond the graveyard, far beyond what she could see or hear, something else stirred, not retreating this time, not waiting, but waking, as if the choice she had made had reached further than this night, further than this place. And Lucien felt it too. She could see it in the way his gaze shifted for just a fraction of a second before returning to her, sharper now, more certain, and for the first time, there was no hesitation left in his voice. "If you stay," he said quietly, each word deliberate, final, "they will come for you." And the warning should have been enough. It should have broken the fragile thread that had formed between them. But Clara did not step back, did not look away, because she already knew her answer. She had known it from the moment she chose not to run, and when she spoke, her voice carried a calm that surprised even her. "Then they will have to go through you." And the silence that followed was not uncertain, not fragile, but absolute. Because for the first time, Lucien did not try to change her mind, did not try to send her away. He simply held her gaze, and in that moment, something ancient, something powerful, something that had existed long before either of them had made the